It all started with a gun pointed at my son's chest on a sunny afternoon right in front of our house. No warning, no build-up, just a loaded pistol aimed steady, finger trembling on the trigger, while Karen stood a few feet behind him, clutching her HOA clipboard like it was a royal decree. Randy, the man with the gun, wasn't some random trespasser. He was Karen's boyfriend, part-time sheriff's deputy, full-time neighborhood menace, and he thought that shiny badge pinned to his chest gave him the right to wave a weapon around like he was starring in his own backyard cop drama. But what Randy didn't know, what Karen couldn't even begin to comprehend, was that my son, the young man he was threatening over something as ridiculous as a bird feeder, wasn't just another suburban resident. Jason was special forces, highly trained, calm under fire. And on that day, carrying more firepower legally tucked away on him than Randy could dream of handling properly. But Jason didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, one hand still loosely holding a bag of birdseed, eyes steady and unblinking, like he had all the time in the world. And in that split second, the balance of power shifted without a word being spoken. Karen thought she had the upper hand. Randy thought he was the big dog on the block. They didn't realize they had just started a war they couldn't possibly win. When we bought our home in Willow Creek Estates, we thought we were buying into a dream. Rows of sugar maple trees lined the sidewalks, families waved from porch swings, and the local newsletter gushed about block parties, summer BBQs, and a strong sense of community spirit. It sounded perfect for us, a place where we could retire in peace, maybe finally plant the rose garden I'd always wanted, maybe spoil some future grandkids on lazy Sunday afternoons. What nobody warned us about was the real power structure here. It wasn't the smiling mayor at the welcome barbecue, or the friendly crossing guard waving the kids to school. No, the real authority wore tennis shoes, carried a clipboard, and answered to no one but herself. Karen. At first it seemed harmless enough. A newsletter here, a reminder there about trash day schedules and porch light policies. Typical suburban micromanagement, we thought. But slowly, the notices turned into citations. The reminders turned into threats of fines. And somewhere between approving which shades of beige were permissible for front doors and policing how many pumpkins you could display in October, Karen crowned herself Queen of Willow Creek Estates. Most people just rolled their eyes and complied. Easier to pay the $25 mailbox fine than risk a confrontation. Easier to repaint the fence a shade lighter than argue. She thrived on that apathy, feeding off it like a tyrant ruling a kingdom built on polite silence. And then Randy showed up, her self-proclaimed security advisor, and the power went straight to her head. Jason coming home should have been a moment of peace, a reunion marked by quiet mornings and stronger coffee. He wasn't the type to make noise about his service, never the guy to wear his military background like a badge of honor. To most people, he was just a quiet man with careful eyes and a habit of saying sir and ma'am without thinking. But Karen didn't see a hero when she saw Jason pulling into our driveway in his dusty F-250. She didn't see a son who had survived 4 tours in some of the world's worst places. She saw a threat to her perfect little bubble. His truck was too big, she said. The tires crossed a boundary line by exactly 2 inches. Never mind that it was parked squarely on our own property. His American flag on the porch was provocative imagery. Never mind that half the street had miniature flags lining their lawns every 4th of July. She left notes. She issued warnings. But Jason never reacted the way she wanted. He didn't storm into her meetings. He didn't send angry emails. He just smiled, nodded, and went right on living like she didn't exist. And that, more than anything, seemed to drive her mad. Because Karen didn't just want compliance. She wanted submission. And Jason, calm, respectful, deadly Jason, gave her nothing but indifference. She wasn't used to that. She didn't know what to do with it. So she escalated. She sent Randy. First it was little things, walking by slowly while Jason worked in the garage, making comments about suspicious activity, taking photos of his truck and measuring the front yard with an actual ruler. They were looking for a reaction. They wanted a confrontation they could control. But Jason was trained for bigger battles than petty suburban warfare. He was patient, methodical, and if Karen and Randy thought they were laying a trap for him, they were the ones walking straight into it. Karen didn't start as the nightmare neighbor. No, she slipped into power like a hand slides into a well-worn glove. At first, she was just that nice lady from the HOA board, handing out cookies at meetings and suggesting new flowers for the entrance signs. People liked her enthusiasm. They liked that someone else was willing to worry about the sprinkler timers and the height of the hedges. One by one, they handed her more authority, grateful they didn't have to deal with the endless logistics of suburban order. But somewhere along the way, those cookies turned into citations, and the friendly reminders turned into mandates. Karen rewrote the bylaws, not once, not twice, but again and again, until the HOA handbook was thicker than the town's tax code. She created rules so specific that you couldn't sneeze without violating Section 4.6 subsection C about unsanctioned auditory disruptions. No one wanted to challenge her, because challenging Karen meant 3-hour meetings under fluorescent lights, filled with passive-aggressive smiles and thinly veiled threats about community values. So people stopped attending meetings. They stopped voting. They stopped caring. And that's exactly when Karen made her final move. She closed the voting loopholes, changed the rules about board elections, and cemented herself as the de facto queen of Willow Creek Estates. No term limits, no checks, no balances. Just Karen, her clipboard, and a growing taste for authority that no one saw coming, until it was too late. Randy entered our lives like a bad storm on a sunny day, sudden, loud, and impossible to ignore. At first, he was just a name Karen dropped during HOA meetings, talking about how a friend in law enforcement had ideas about improving neighborhood safety. Then he started showing up. He'd park his squad car at the entrance of the subdivision, chatting with passers-by, flashing his badge just enough to remind you he was armed and authorized. It wasn't about safety. It was about intimidation. He wasn't here to protect anyone. He was here to enforce Karen's version of perfection with the power of a gun and a badge. If your grass was too long, Randy might stop by and ask you why you weren't taking better care of your home. If you had an unapproved flag, Randy might let you know it was drawing attention and hint that someone, maybe you, could end up cited. And if you dared question why a part-time deputy from another jurisdiction was monitoring your mailbox color, you might find yourself with a compliance letter the very next day. People learned quickly. Toe the line, keep your head down, don't ask questions. But Jason wasn't like most people. He watched. He took notes. He gathered evidence while Randy and Karen grew bolder, more reckless, more convinced they were untouchable. They thought they had the whole neighborhood under their thumbs. They had no idea that one of the quietest houses on the block was the one preparing to fight back with precision they couldn't comprehend. It was just a bird feeder. One small wooden bird feeder hanging from the branch of our old oak tree, swaying gently in the morning breeze. To Jason, it was a small piece of peace. A way to sit on the porch, sip coffee, and watch the cardinals and blue jays flutter by, free and unbothered. To Karen, it was an act of war. Within 24 hours of Jason putting it up, we received a formal notice citing us for violation of HOA Code 7.3c. Unauthorized wildlife attractant devices. A $150 fine, payable immediately. Jason didn't argue. He didn't storm into the clubhouse. He simply smiled, tucked the notice away in a folder, already growing thick with documentation, and went back to filling the feeder with seed. 3 days later, Karen herself marched up the sidewalk, Randy trailing 2 steps behind like some poorly trained guard dog. She announced that the bird feeder must be removed immediately, or further action would be taken. Jason, calm as always, pointed out that there were at least 5 other bird feeders visible from where they were standing. She didn't blink. "They're on the list," she said, as if that explained anything, as if she was building an enemy registry out of the most harmless acts imaginable. Jason nodded once, tucked his hands into his pockets and said, "Okay." That was it. No anger, no protest, just that one word, spoken so quietly it was almost a whisper. Karen mistook it for surrender. Randy thought it meant fear, but I knew better. I had seen that look in Jason's eyes before. Not here, not in this peaceful suburban nightmare, but in grainy photos sent from halfway across the world. It was the look of a man who was planning something inevitable, something final. And from that moment on, the clock started ticking for Karen and Randy. They just didn't know it yet. After the bird feeder incident, the atmosphere in Willow Creek Estates shifted. It wasn't sudden, like a storm rolling in with thunder and lightning. It was slower, heavier, like the air thickening with humidity before something big breaks. You could feel it every time you stepped outside. The way Karen's car would crawl past our house at 5 miles per hour. Windows rolled down just enough to catch a glimpse of what we were doing. The way Randy parked further down the street now, trying to act casual, but you could see the glint of his mirrored sunglasses every time you glanced out the window. They weren't just watching. They were waiting, hoping to catch something, anything. They could twist into a new violation. It became routine. Every few days, another notice on the door. Grass too high by half an inch. Decorative wreath deemed seasonally inappropriate. Jason's truck, exhibiting aggressive patriotic symbolism, whatever that was supposed to mean. But Jason didn't bite. He didn't storm down to the HOA meetings. He didn't start shouting matches on the sidewalk. He handled it the way he handled everything else, with a methodical calm that made him impossible to provoke. He'd log each notice, photograph every interaction, save every email. Day by day, building a mountain of evidence, while Karen and Randy, blind to their own arrogance, dug themselves deeper into a hole they wouldn't be able to climb out of. It drove them crazy. You could see it in the way Karen's emails got sharper, more desperate, how Randy's patrols got more frequent, how their smiles started looking more like grimaces. They were baiting him, poking him, hoping for an explosion they could blame on him. And all the while, Jason just smiled, that small, infuriating smile that said, "I'm not playing your game. I'm playing my own." The day Randy pulled the gun, it was hot enough to feel the pavement radiating through your shoes. Jason had gone outside to adjust the bird feeder, refill it for the morning visitors he'd grown so fond of watching. He moved without hurry, without suspicion, the same way he always did. Calm, steady, the picture of a man at peace with his little corner of the world. Karen spotted him from 2 houses down and wasted no time. She came marching up the sidewalk, clipboard clutched in her hands like it was a weapon, her face set in that sour expression she wore when she thought she was doing something righteous. 2 steps behind her, there was Randy, holster heavy at his hip, jaw clenched tight. Jason barely looked up when they approached. Karen launched straight into her accusations, shrill and furious, citing some newly invented emergency clause about unauthorized wildlife encouragement activities, or some nonsense only she could have dreamed up. Jason listened politely, nodding once or twice, not interrupting, not giving them anything they could use against him. It was Randy who snapped first. Maybe it was the heat, or the embarrassment, or the quiet way Jason refused to be rattled. Maybe it was all 3. But without warning, Randy's hand dropped to his side, and suddenly the gun was out, pointed straight at Jason's chest. inches away from the Special Forces badge Jason didn't wear, but carried in every fiber of his being. Karen gasped, a sharp, quick breath of victory, like she thought the sight of that gun would finally crack the calm Jason wore like armor. But it didn't. Jason didn't flinch. He didn't move a single muscle except for the slow, deliberate lifting of his eyes to meet Randy's. No fear, no anger, just an unnerving calm that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Jason knew exactly how fast he could draw if he needed to, exactly how quickly he could disarm Randy and end this entire charade. But he didn't, because Jason wasn't thinking about winning a fight. He was thinking about winning the war. Instead of reacting, he smiled. A small, slow, terrifying smile. The kind of smile that says, "You've already lost, you just don't know it yet." Karen didn't understand it. Randy didn't either. But somewhere, deep in the reptilian part of their brains, they must have felt it. Felt the ground shift under their feet. Felt the weight of their own stupidity crashing down around them. And standing there, in the thick summer air, with a gun pointed at his heart, and a clipboard full of nonsense being waved in his face, Jason didn't have to do a thing, because they had just handed him everything he needed on a silver platter. And from that moment on, it wasn't a question of if Karen and Randy would fall. It was only a question of how hard. The fallout hit faster than anyone could have expected. Within the hour after Randy drew his weapon, word started to spread. Not just whispers among the immediate neighbors, but calls, texts, screenshots, flying across the community like wildfire. By the time the real county deputies arrived, summoned not by Randy or Karen, but by a neighbor who had seen the whole thing unfold through her kitchen window, half the block was quietly watching from behind curtains and half-drawn blinds. This wasn't just another petty HOA scuffle. This was serious. And when the deputies showed up, they weren't interested in Jason. They barely glanced at him. Their eyes locked straight onto Randy, standing there still puffed up like he had done something heroic instead of something criminal. They asked him to lower his weapon. They asked him to explain himself. And the moment Randy opened his mouth, stammering about community safety and potential threats, Jason simply stepped back and said, calm and even, "There's a restraining order against him, filed and granted yesterday." You could feel the temperature in the air shift. The deputies stiffened. Karen's triumphant little smirk faltered. Randy's hand twitched at his side, like he was realizing for the first time that he wasn't the one in control of this narrative. One deputy pulled out a folded document from his pocket, the restraining order, verified, stamped, real. And right there, on our carefully manicured front lawn, Randy was placed under arrest. Cuffed, disarmed, and read his rights in front of the very community he and Karen had tried to bully into submission. Karen tried to intervene, of course, tried to shout over the officers, accused Jason of setting them up, of orchestrating some elaborate sting. But no one believed her anymore. Not after everything they had seen. Not after everything they had lived through under her rule. Some neighbors even clapped, quiet but unmistakable, a slow ripple of relief moving through the street like the first breeze after a long, suffocating storm. And as Randy was led away, Jason bent down, picked up Karen's precious clipboard, the one she had dropped in the chaos, and flipped through the top few pages. What he found made him chuckle softly, a sound that was somehow more devastating than any angry outburst could have been. Karen had been signing off on her own monthly stipends, triple the amount legally allowed by the HOA charter she herself had rewritten. It wasn't just about bird feeders and flagpoles anymore. It was about fraud, about embezzlement, about a woman so drunk on power, she forgot that even in a small, quiet neighborhood, the law still meant something. And Jason? He didn't have to lift a finger to take her down. She had already done it to herself. You'd think after something like that, after watching her boyfriend hauled off in cuffs and realizing her little empire was crumbling, Karen would have backed off. Maybe slink away quietly, put her house up for sale, leave town with whatever dignity she had left. But Karen wasn't built for quiet exits. No, she doubled down. Within 2 days, a mass HOA newsletter hit every mailbox in Willow Creek Estates, a desperate manifesto titled Maintaining Order in Times of Disruption. In it, she accused Jason of being a dangerous element, of staging incidents to destabilize the community, of threatening the very values Willow Creek was built on. She didn't just insult him. She insulted everyone who had dared to question her, painting herself as the last bastion of civility in a neighborhood overrun by chaos. The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't so deeply pathetic. But that email, that ridiculous, desperate email, was the final nail in her coffin. Because in her rage, she didn't just send it to the residents. She CC'd the entire county board, and Jason's lawyer. Yes, by then, Jason had retained a civil rights attorney, a bulldog of a woman who specialized in HOA abuse cases and had been practically salivating at the mountain of evidence Jason had quietly gathered. Everything Karen had done, from unauthorized surveillance installations to falsified proxy votes to the misuse of community funds, was now part of a formal legal complaint. And it didn't stop there. Investigators subpoenaed HOA financial records and found years of shady bookkeeping, fake maintenance projects that were never completed, HOA dues funneled into special projects that conveniently lined Karen's own pockets, payments made to companies that didn't even exist on paper. It was a rabbit hole of corruption and arrogance, and Karen had practically paved the trail herself. The county scheduled a full formal hearing, but word spread fast. The tiny meeting room planned for it wouldn't hold the number of residents who wanted to attend. They had to move it to the town library's main auditorium, rows of folding chairs set up hastily, neighbors arriving early, clutching folders full of old fines and citations. Some brought photos, others brought videos. One guy even rolled in a wheelbarrow carrying his banned garden gnomes as evidence of crimes against community spirit. Jason sat in the front row, silent, composed, the quiet center of a storm he had never needed to shout his way through. Karen entered late, wearing pearls and the stiffest smile you've ever seen, dragging 2 bulging manila folders behind her like they could somehow save her from what was coming. She didn't bring a lawyer. She still thought she could talk her way out of it. But when Jason stood up and calmly, methodically laid out every violation, every abuse, every lie, complete with dates, signatures, photos, and even audio recordings, the room shifted. The muttering grew louder. Heads turned, fingers pointed. Karen tried to object, tried to paint herself as the victim of a neighborhood conspiracy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her voice cracked, her hands shook, and when the county panel recessed and came back with the verdict, they didn't sugarcoat it. Effective immediately, Karen was removed from the HOA board, banned from holding any position of authority within the community again, pending criminal investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and civil rights violations. The moment the announcement was made, the room erupted into applause. A slow, building roar of relief and triumph. Someone even started a chant, "Free the bird feeders." And for once, even the most reserved neighbors didn't hold back. Karen stormed out, her precious clipboard clattering to the floor behind her, abandoned like everything else she had tried so desperately to control. And Jason? He stayed seated, smiled that quiet, knowing smile, and simply said, "Peace takes work, but it's always worth it."